Welcome to this special Malard at Large, which is going to focus upon the Iranian presidential election. It has been the 13th presidential elections since the advent of the Islamic Republic 42 years ago. More than ever, Iran is at a crossroad today concerning its political, economic, military, I would even say, nuclear future, squeezed between the impact of the US sanctions dating back to the Trump era, the arrival at the White House of new US President Joe Biden, who wants to resume the negotiations on the nuclear deal, and the Iranian Ayatollah, which wants to impose its conditions to renegotiate. For the first time in 25 years, the ultra-conservatives have in their hands all the levers of power. The Supreme Guide, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the presidency of the Islamic Republic with its new president, Ebrahim Raisi, and the Majlis, the parliament. This is the ideal configuration to prepare the succession of Ali Khamenei. To talk about these fundamental issues tonight, let me introduce my guest. In London, Amir Taheri, Iranian writer, journalist, specialist of Iran, who wrote the first biography on Ayatollah Khomeini. Arshya Jolliver, who is in the studio with me, specialist of geopolitics and intelligence. In Washington, D.C., Khansarinia, Policy Director for National Union for Democracy in Iran. Now we are going to deal with different themes concerning Iran and the latest events. We are going to start with the political aftermath with Ebrahim Raisi at the internal level. And I will ask Amir Taheri to let us know what he thinks about what's going on inside Iran now we have Ebrahim Raisi as a new president.
Well, the political aftermath could be considered in three segments. First of all, in the interior of the Khomeinist movement, now we could see an end to the factional fights that have been going on for decades, and the concentration of power in the hands of one of the factions, nominally led by Ayatollah Khamenei. Deuxième aspect that is interesting is that now the tough decisions that the previous governments could not take regarding relations with the big powers, especially the United States, Russia, and China, could be more easily solved. The Russians want the Islamic Republic to ratify the Caspian Convention, which has been sitting there for the past 2.5 years and could not be ratified because of factional fightings. The Chinese want also an agreement, 25-year agreement, which has been in the air for the past 6 years, to be ratified quickly. And Mr. Biden, President Biden in the United States, wants the Islamic Republic to come back to the nuclear deal concluded with President Obama. All these three things could happen more quickly before. But, you know, there is an elephant in the room that could sort of affect all these three aspects, and that is the Iranian people who are now very angry. They did not vote in this election in sufficient numbers, and they really thirst for change, not only change of personnel of the government, but change of regime as a whole.
We'll come back to it. I would like to go to Washington, where we have Khansarinia. How do you now analyze new game, I should say, with Ebrahim Raisi?
Well, I think that remarkably little will change inside Iran, and a remarkable amount will change outside of Iran. I think, as Mr. Taheri referred to, there will be some small changes, perhaps within the system. You may see some more consolidation around the person of the supreme leader and the person that he may choose to be his successor. Some are saying that, in fact, with the selection, not the election, I should note, of Ebrahim Raisi as the president of the Islamic Republic, that Ali Khamenei is setting him up to be supreme leader. But there are still many who support, including possibly the supreme leader himself, Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader's own son. So there will still be some factional infighting. But as to what the selection of this man, Ebrahim Raisi, who we should note is a mass murderer, he is personally responsible for the execution, torture, rape, and burial in unmarked mass graves of thousands of political prisoners. The selection of this man to lead the presidency of the Islamic Republic will change remarkably little for the people of Iran. The people of Iran, unfortunately, as long as this regime is in power, will continue to be ruled by a brutal dictatorship. And the selection of Ebrahim Raisi does not change anything. We're often told in the West that the rotation between the moderates and the hardliners, so-called, will change things for the Iranian people. That's never been proven to be the case. Abroad, however, this could actually pose some change to show the world that this regime is what the Iranian people have always told them that is, an illegal, occupying, and criminal regime. So I would look more abroad and the Islamic Republic's relations with the world for some significant changes after the election.
Arshya, Jolliver, you are the specialist analyst of geopolitics and intelligence. Do you share the view of Amir Taheri and Khansarinia about what to expect now concretely with a new political situation inside Iran?
Inside Iran, I think, Christian, we are entering a very dark era for the Iranian population. And because we cannot just say that a president change, it's not any president. Honestly, even up to the last minute, I would think maybe Jalili pass. Maybe they're not going to push so far, as far. I think this is a preparation for removing completely the position of a presidential position in Iran, in the Iranian system. We're going to probably, after the death of Khamenei, going to see a new system with a parliament, with a prime minister. And then it's going to be a new combination of something between China, Russia colonizing, and a sort of a Daesh, a sort of a Islamic state, pure Islamic state inside Iran. And from the other side, in Washington, we have an administration which is very well cooperating with the regime. So I don't know how we can see any hope in such situation.
I get back to Amir Taheri. I imagine you are very pessimistic about the future when you hear that everything is going to be in the hands of the ultra-radicals around Khamenei.
Well, I think, first of all, it would be missing the point if we focus the whole thing on the person of Raisi, because Raisi is the product of a system and an ideology. And those before him, who were heads of the judiciary, were as, if you like, nasty and as brutal as he was. Maybe he was a bit more than the others. But it's like, in France, if you had Fouquier-Tinville, who became president of France. But, Fouquier-Tinville was also the product of a system. So what is important from my point of view for the Iranian people is to oppose the whole system, not just personnel. As for how many succession, if the regime lasts that long, I don't think he could impose his son or anybody else within his family because he just doesn't have the base, the popular base, even within the Khomeiniist movement, to do so. My fear is that Iran has become a kind of boat or a kind of ship without any captain. It's going in a stormy sea. Khamenei doesn't control everything. He doesn't do that anymore. He can't. And there are many different interest groups that are pulling this ship in one direction and another. And I think decision-making, apart from arresting people and shooting demonstrators and so on in the street, will be more difficult. But even that is now becoming more difficult for the regime to do. For example, now we have riots in our smallest province, Boyer Ahmad and Koh-Kiluye, and the reports that we get is that the coercive forces, the police, the revolutionary guards and so on are reluctant to shoot people in the streets.
Okay, Amir Taheri, we are going to have a commercial break. Now we have a commercial break and we are getting back to all of you in a few minutes. back with our three prominent guests to talk now about the political aftermath. We have been talking very briefly about the political aftermath at the internal level. Now let's go to the external level, which means, can we deal with Iran, with the new regime? Can we deal about the nuclear? Is that a possibility, or can we say the game is over? I would like to hear first Khansarinia in Washington.
Well, it's funny, you used the phrase, the game is over. That's one of the chants that the people on the streets of Iran use, reformist hardliner, the game is over. And it goes back to the point that Mr. Taheri was making, that for the Iranian people, this regime is no longer a legitimate government. It no longer represents them in a legitimate fashion. And therefore, on the international level, it no longer has the legitimacy or the popular sovereignty, if you will, to represent the nation of Iran in any international negotiations. And so I think that that has been clear for a long time. The selection of Mr. Raisi, however, makes that much more clear for both the United States and for European powers. At least it should. We've already seen some signs of this. We've already seen Agnes Kalamard of Amnesty International call for an investigation into Mr. Raisi's crimes against humanity, his human rights abuses. The German government, the American government have all expressed significant reservations and concerns about the selection of such a criminal to the post of presidency of this regime. As Mr. Taheri also said, most of the officials in this regime are criminals, but it's the fact that Mr. Raisi's record is so blood-soaked and is so obvious that it will make it much more difficult. I don't think that the Islamic Republic will be willing to budge in any way because they're so ideologically hell-bent against that. The only chance they have, Christian, is if the Biden administration surrenders completely. And if they surrender to one of the demands of the Islamic Republic, which is to remove sanctions on Ebrahim Raisi, that will be one of the most embarrassing and truly consequential decisions an American administration has ever made on foreign policy, and will set a horrible tone going forward.
Do you agree?
No, I don't agree. Because the problem is that everybody's talking about the same nuclear deal of 2015. We don't know which deal they want to do. They want to deal. So that's very important to take it in mind, that they want to deal, but we're not there to know exactly about what they are discussing, which type of deal they want to do. And you see from Iranian side, Khamenei, he did everything to remove the reformists. It started from the leak of the voice of Zarif. That was the end of the reformists. And then he brought Raisi. I know that Raisi is a mass murderer. Everybody knows that. The election, I mean, there was the election fraud. That's not new. It is started in 1979 when the population of the Iran was 37 million and the 18 million could vote, and they announced that 20 million voted yes. So, I mean, legitimacy is an internal affair. Look at Assad, why he is always there. And Raisi is just there as a puppet. He can be removed easily after the death of Khamenei, which can happen in this summer or in autumn. I don't know. But I think there will be a deal. We don't know which type of deal.
No, Amir Taheri, do you think, as our friend just said it, Arshya Jolliver just said it, we will have a deal one way or the other, and that once more, 6 years after the first deal of 2015 under the Obama era, Biden might be again so naive to accept a new deal with Iran and with Raisi and Khamenei?
According to outgoing Foreign Minister Zarif, the Islamic Republic needs a minimum of $60 billion a year in order to survive more or less as it is, to cover its expenses at home for military security and so on, and also its adventures abroad. That would require Iran to export 1.5 million barrels of oil each day to secure that income. And this is the objective of the Iranian regime, or those who are in charge of the regime at the moment. And I think for that, they are ready to accept almost anything.
Amir Taheri, I would like to hear all the three of you in 1 minute each on the same question. Whatever may happen, do you think that one way or the other, Iran is led to have the nuclear bomb the same way as North Korean Kim Jong-un has got it, as in each one's life? 1 minute each on that. Cameron.
the only way to guarantee that there will be a nuclear bomb in Tehran is if the Islamic Republic continues to stay in power. The Iranian people do not have a desire for offensive nuclear weapons, I think, by and large, we can say. The Iranian people want to live in peace and coexistence, not only with the people of the region, but with the people of the world, as they showed that they did before the Islamic Revolution. So the Islamic Republic will continue to strive for a nuclear bomb as long as it is in power. No matter what nuclear deal is signed, no matter what negotiations take place, that is their aim, because they are a genocidal regime that, as Ms. Jolliver said, is becoming more and more like an Islamic State, but a Shiite version. The only way to prevent a nuclear bomb is to prevent the continuation of the Islamic Republic.
Arshya?
I don't think the world would allow the Islamic regime to have a nuclear bomb. But this is not going to happen. It can happen through a deal. But I just give an example. At the time of Saddam Hussein, because all the nuclear facilities, France was providing it, you know it very well. And now we see, about a month ago, some documents were revealed that actually France was providing a sort of uranium to Saddam, which wasn't even suitable to make a bomb. Russia would never allow Iran having a nuclear bomb. And Iran is incapable to produce a bomb which is a standard. The world knows it, and they cannot do it alone. So unless North Korea helps them, I don't know. But I don't think the world would accept that.
Amir, you heard Arshya saying that Iran is not able to get a nuclear bomb. Do you agree with that?
Well, Iran's strategy for a long time, even before the Islamic Revolution, was to master the whole of nuclear technology, including the ability to make a bomb if necessary. It's like, you know, if you build a kitchen and you collect the ingredients needed for making a soup, but you don't do it. You wait until sometime when you think some guests are arriving. So Iran does have the technological capability to produce nuclear bombs within a very short time, if the leadership decides that. But the next stage, it would be how to carry these bombs. You know, you need special nuclear warheads with specific payloads. You need long-range missiles, and now Khamenei, in order to please President Biden, announced last week that he has ordered that the missile program be limited to 2,000 kilometers only, which covers the Iranian territory.
Amir, I would like to get now, because I know time is flying quickly, I would like to hear the three of you on Israel attitude. What do you expect? First, I would like you to hear to what new Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said recently.
This election is, I would say, the last chance for the world powers to wake up before returning to the nuclear agreement and to understand who they're doing business with. These guys are murderers, mass murderers. A regime of brutal hangmen must never be allowed to have weapons of mass destruction that will enable it to not to kill thousands but millions. Israel's position will not change on this.
Well, we know about Israel's positions. I would like to hear very briefly, each of us, on can Israel intervene militarily should the United States don't move and Israeli consider that really there is a threat for Israel with Iran, the new regime. Cameron.
Well, we're against any military strike on Iran. However, I believe that you've seen over the past several weeks, months, and years that the Israelis will not sit silent while the Islamic Republic continues to produce advanced offensive weapons. I think what the Israeli government, Mr. Bennett, or whoever is the prime minister after, and other countries in the region and across the world have to realize is that they can continue to take piecemeal steps. They can continue to take small steps to kick the can down the road on the Islamic Republic's nuclear weapons, on its ballistic missiles program. All of this will continue, no matter how many small surgical strikes they make, no matter how many operations they launch inside the country covertly. Until this regime is gone, the threat to the region and the threat to the world will continue. The only logical policy for the regional countries, for the world, is to support the Iranian people in establishing a secular democracy. That is the only way to solve all of these problems.
We will come to that in my last theme. We will deal with. I would like to hear Arshya Jolliver on that.
I think Prime Minister Bennett, he's absolutely right to be worried about Iran, not only for the nuclear program, but in particular about the missiles. And I think as Israel is now finding itself quite alone in the region after President Trump. So maybe at some point he has no other choice than doing the same that Israel has done in Iraq, and that would
1981
the strike, targeted, not entering in a war. But even for that, he has to be very, I think Israeli administration, they have to be very careful, and they know it definitely, because Israel is surrounded by Iranian missiles. And that would be another problem. So definitely they would need Russian cooperations, definitely.
I would like to hear the three of you on the last theme, important. According to you, is there any alternative to a regime which is rejected by a majority of Iranians? Kamran, do you think of any alternative in Iran, possibly in the coming future?
Well, absolutely. I think the people of Iran themselves represent the most important alternative to this anti-Iranian, un-Iranian Islamic Republic. But of course, in addition to the people as a mass who have been recently supporting the No to the Islamic Republic campaign, which has united the historically fractured opposition, you do need, of course, a political elite. You do need a political opposition. I think there's no doubt that the most popular single figure within Iran is Prince Reza Pahlavi, and what he has insisted on is a coalescence, the formation of a coalition of secular, democratic, nationalist opposition forces. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, you saw one example of that when you had monarchists sit next to Republicans and liberals sit next to conservatives. To Mr. Taheri's point, realizing that Iran is at a critical juncture, and all those who have differences should be willing to put those differences aside until the Iranian people can vote in free elections, until a constituent assembly can decide the future shape of government and the form of government. So the alternative is the Iranian people and the political elite are coming to that conclusion that the prince has pushed them to come to for some 42 years now.
Well, we will see what's kept in store for the future. I would just add one few seconds. Arshya, any alternative for you?
As long as we see the same administration at the White House, no. And the question is not, is there any alternative? How are we going to do it? I'm talking to you as an analyst and not as a political activist for the democracy in Iran. And collapsing the Iranian regime is very, very complicated. And Europeans know that, Americans know that, Israel know that. So we better don't be hallucinated and wish for things that I would like that happens. But as long as we have a Biden administration and a deal probably, it's not even about is there any alternative? How are we going to do it? I don't see that happening for
Arshya, Amir.
Maybe a velvet revolution.
Arshya Jolliver, Amir Taheri, Kamran Khansarinia, many thanks for your participation. It was very important to have your lights on the possible future in Iran, especially concerning the nuclear threat. Many thanks. And we'll talk again to our TV viewers for other specials we will do in the coming future. Many thanks. Good night.